Welcome to the Quantum City Initiative, a show about the most important stories, ideas at the intersection of AI, cities, real estate, and the leaders shaping the future of how and where we live and work. Do you save and reinvigorate cities, or are you building new ones?
What is most critical for cities in the future with this sort of AI factory race that we're in? All right, EP 27, the QCI show. We got a very special guest here today, and I will say we just got some results back from the test. We've been testing our audience, and Chase, you weren't here for the last interview with Daniel English. Shout out, highest ranked show to date, and they did say it's of your absence. So
at least I can contribute in one way.
So I will say we got a little bit of pressure here, but we got an incredible show here today. We got Robert Lair from Hula Lakeside Investments. My co-host Chase is back. I'm Greg Gomer. Robert, I got a big background on you. You were obviously at our Strata conference, which was absolutely amazing. But why don't you do a brief intro on who you are? And that way, what I can bring up is the stuff that you don't mention in your intro, and we could start there in the conversation. But Rob, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me. Like I said, I've been watching some episodes. I love your show, so thank you. I've been an investor my entire life, 13 years old, got a little portfolio, and I've been obsessed ever since. But not starting all the way back there, really just going back 8 years. I met Russ Scully. We're from the same hometown in Jersey. Took me through this oven factory, Blodgett Ovens. He was on a board that was looking at business development, and he was restless, and he said, let's go through this oven factory and see what we can do with it. We did, and the upshot is that we wanted to curate 60, 70, 80 businesses, the best ones in Vermont, had the most promise for growth, and put them in Crucible, right? Get a bird's eye view, and then start investing in them. Why? Because we were interested, we love our state so much. We had kids going into college, and we said, where are they gonna work? We live in an absolutely beautiful state as the state of Vermont, but the job scene here, economic development scene, is rough. And we said, we can fix that. I've been investing all my life. Russ has been investing all his life. So that's what we did. Last 8 years, we put 70 businesses into this crucible. It's been unbelievable. We made 25 investments in those companies. I think we started with maybe a combined market cap of about $400 million. When beta IPO'd in last November, we had, I think, a combined market cap in the portfolio of over $9 billion. So 20x market cap is really what we've been doing over the last 8 years. I'm really looking forward to talking much more about that. But before here, I was at Morgan Stanley. So I've been kind of a hardcore investor my entire life. And the last 8 years has been just the ride of a lifetime. So that's the short version.
So Rob, how long have you been a Vermont guy?
I've been here for 30 years. My wife brought up here. We live on land that she grew up on 60 years ago. And that's a big part of this whole thing, guys, right? And I love where we live. And I hear you guys talking about that kind of thing all the time. And that's the cornerstone of everything, right? And that passion is what I think has driven us and the investors around us, our friends, to do what we've done, right? Because we want to develop an amazing sense of place. And we also want to have a future for our children. Yeah.
That's great. So can you talk a little bit about, just for all the listeners, the model? Because what you guys are doing at Hula, and we talked a little before the show, I think it's really fascinating, the intersection of the different areas you're playing at. But can you just describe a little bit about how you guys are different and what you've built over the last several years?
Yeah, sure. There's two pillars to it, right? You guys are CRE guys. Physical bricks and mortar really matter when you want to do economic development and push that GDP thing that you guys are always coming back to. We're 150,000 square feet. Like I said, let's put 70 businesses into the Petri dish. We have 1,200 people have access to these buildings every day. We've got 500 co-working members. We have 45 offices, right? So the physical infrastructure is number one. The bricks and mortar absolutely matter. And that bricks and mortar has to be capping, right? We're not doing it for charity. It has to work. Whatever, caps at 4.5%. We put QOZ on top of that, got it up to around a 7% cap. So just the physical infrastructure itself has to work. We went down to WeWork, and I heard you guys talk quite a bit about WeWork back in 2018, a little bit more of the heyday, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And we went through 7 WeWorks down in Manhattan and all that. Amazing model and all that. We're very inspired by it. But it was missing something in our view, a beating heart, which is community involvement, like real deep community involvement, and then the investment arm. Just imagine work in Manhattan, and I know there is some of this, and certainly in Boston we saw this, where there is a venture private equity outfit that's sitting there at the front of WeWork that says, we're going to give away $300 million this over the next 5 years, and we're going to try to attract $3 billion of outside capital to your companies. And that's the first thing that you see when you enter the WeWork. Everyone's going to want to be in that WeWork, right? All the great founders are going to want to be there. Why? Because you've shown them the money, right? You've shown them access to capital. And we're from the community, right? We're their neighbors, offering them that money. So the model is bricks and mortar. We create a Times Square, a town square for everything entrepreneurship and everything business for the state of Vermont. We don't believe that's the government's role. We don't believe that's the city's role. It's the chamber's role. It's the private sector's role. And then we create an infrastructure of investors around that. We've got 100 investors in our network. We've deployed about $300 million over the last 6 years. We've attracted $3 billion of outside capital to Vermont companies. And we've done it in this beautiful physical CRE investment.
Yeah, I know why Burlington and Vermont is important to you. We talk about dynamism. We talk about quantum cities. We've talked about Chicago. We've talked about Austin, Texas. We've talked about Miami. We've talked about Boston, and we're Boston guys. And Boston, every day when I go in there, I'm just troubled by, I believe we're significantly falling behind. How the numbers you said are staggering. And before we get through some of the actual show notes, what success are you really going to have in Burlington? To be honest, it's very far away. It's gorgeous. I get it. It's in Lake Champlain. The background behind you is amazing. But can Burlington really be a quantum city, even though it's off the beaten path a little bit?
It's always chicken or the egg, right? It can be a quantum city. The only factor, in my view, that makes a quantum city, right? 10% average annual GDP growth, as defined by you guys.
Mm-hmm.
If there's access to capital and there's access to expertise. It's not about, when we first started, people said, A, you're crazy to do venture. I've been investing my entire life. But A, you're crazy to do venture. I've heard you guys talk about that too. It's a very hard world. And you're crazy, kind of, people said, to do it in venture in the state of Vermont. That's a double whammy set up for failure. Just picture this in tier 2 and tier 3 cities around the country. You have a bunch of successful people who've started businesses in small towns, and Steve Case, Rise of the Rest. Yep. You guys were plugged into that whole thing. Silicon Valley investors don't come to Burlington, Vermont, right? So we had the privilege of knowing who all the founders were, right? Because I've been here for 30 years. Kyle Clark, founder of Beta Technologies, IPO'd last year for $7.5 billion. He was my neighbor, right? That's a Vermont thing. And that's true in all these small cities all over the country, right? So it's like, the most important thing in investing in venture is knowing the founder and understanding the founder through time. We raised our kids together, right? So this is the power of community-based tier 2, tier 3 city venture private equity investing. There's a lot of downsides. You got no expertise. You got no people to hire into these companies. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. Beta hired 1,000 people, right, in the last 5 years. They all came from outside, pretty much. And they were all tickled pink to be 20 minutes from the ski slopes and 10 minutes to Lake Champlain, and tickled pink to raise their kids where there's no traffic. You know, if you want to skin up in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and arrive at your desk at 8 o'clock, you can do that here, right? If you want to go play golf, you can just jump on a golf course. You're not going to get stuck in traffic. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can form a multi-billion-dollar company, and you can live in paradise. And that's true in small communities all over the country. And that's the model, frankly, that we want to propagate, like
Mm.
our mutual friend, Dominic Endicott, and hold it up to other communities and say, hey, we did this here. We're having a blast, by the way, doing it. And oh, you can really help GDP and jobs and lots of other things too, childcare, housing that we're working on.
Yeah. So, Rob, I think the model that you guys are proving out is of true national importance. I think what we saw coming out of the dot-com boom, and you see this with any kind of technology revolution, right? The gap between the top and the rest after the industrial revolution widened, and then it started to come back together. When we look back 120 to 140 years, we're obviously seeing it with, it started with the internet and now it's going to happen with AI. And I think it's like this diffusion and kind of proliferation of what the new technology platform is and how it starts to, I think, intersect with the broader economy. I agree with your earlier statement. I would describe both Greg and I as big free market guys, that it needs to come from the private sector. But what are some things, now that you've been at it for a while, what are some things that you think are critical for people, whether it's at the state or regional level, to be thinking about to support somebody like yourself who really is doing the full stack of economic development? From capital leads the way, and you need to fund failure, but you also need that physical infrastructure to create a real platform and home for these people. What are the things that either could have been more helpful to you, or Vermont and Burlington nailed, that could be replicated in other areas?
We've had to do a lot. In listening to your guys' work and your thinking, I came back again and again to the issue of leadership, right? There's so many issues that you guys are very rightfully trying to solve for, right? And it came back to leadership for me, right? It's like we're taking a leadership role. The tip of the spear for us is business formation. And as you guys always say, GDP growth, right? So that becomes the tip of the spear. We found 5 years in, to your question, Chase, that just business formation is not enough. Why? People are calling us up at Beta and other companies saying we're hiring 20 people in the next 3 weeks. They've got no place to live. So I'll say that that's the first thing, is housing, right? And that's just a common story all over the country. You can't do business development like we're trying to do in these smaller cities. And I wish we had started sooner. About 5 years ago, Russ and I put our heads together and said, we've got to build 1,400 units of housing. No one else is going to do it. We're not developers. We're not CRE folk like that, but someone's got to do it. So we're going to do it. We're going to be the tip of the spear. We're just about to break ground on the first 204 units. I wish we had done that 9 years ago, because without housing, this kind of economic development, we're wasting our time. And anybody out there in these other cities that wants to do this, you need a town square, you need capital, you need co-investors, and start your housing push early. The next thing I would say is you have to have childcare too. We've worked very hard as a $50 million campaign. Let's Grow Kids did an amazing job getting childcare. If you don't have housing, you don't have childcare, you don't have economic development. You guys have heard that over and over again. The third thing I would say, the last thing I would say, is are actively working on changing laws, development laws, zoning laws, infrastructure, TIF, CHIP, we call it here in the state, but TIF, infrastructure finance laws in the state of Vermont. And we've been working on those for 6 years. And without that amenability, really, on the part of the government and the city here in Burlington to do that, we would not be where we are right now. We have amazing internet connectivity. We're right off the highway. So we've got that type of infrastructure, amazing aquifer. We're 100% off the grid here because we're 100% geothermal and solar. So we have amazing infrastructure up here, but we do not have enough housing or childcare.
So the political red tape, that was a constant conversation at Strata. The sort of inability for the private sector to move as fast as they would like to because of the public sector. I'm trying to read between the tea leaves a little bit on what you mentioned there. So it sounds like the state of Vermont and specifically Burlington is leaning in heavily with you. Is that what you saw when you started, or did you really have to quote unquote campaign and work very hard to, I don't know, change the zoning, change the laws? What was that like? And then again, no, let's start with that one and then I'll go to my next questions.
It's not what we found in the beginning. We found a lot of walls,
Yeah.
quite frankly. We just don't do it that way, right? That was always the thing. But here was the linchpin. So they knew that we were embedded with beta, benchmark space, core map all the way along, right? From the very, very beginning. And these companies were making headlines as breakthrough technologies. They saw that, and 3-4 years in, we started to gain trust. They also saw Russ is the owner, a founder of this physical infrastructure, right? Hula. The state officials would walk through here absolutely amazed. Dominic said, this is the most beautiful co-working space he's ever been in anywhere in the world. And that dude's been around.
Yeah.
And we go toe to toe with London and San Francisco, amazing one in Paris, amazing one in Australia, one in Tokyo. But we're in that strata. So the city walked in here and said, wow, these guys are really serious about economic development in the state of Vermont. So that gave us amazing cachet. When our companies started getting traction, was the time when we actually started seeing movement. So that's what I'm talking about, leadership, right? You have to show them the development, the GDP. You show them the GDP, everybody wants to be on board. But if it's just an idea and you're not putting your money where your mouth is, and I give Russ all the credit for this, he took all this risk. Why should they change?
Right.
And now that ringing the bell on the New York Stock Exchange, hiring another 1,000 people in the next 18 months,
Yeah.
you're coming to us and saying, what can we do for you? Another chicken and the egg.
Well, I think one of the things that people always forget, that particularly, I won't say just technology, but let's say innovation more broadly, that there's typically this misconception of first mover advantage where oftentimes the pioneers, the people taking the arrows, are the ones who learn some critical things that need to make a model work. And everything is, it doesn't matter if you're earlier, if you're late, you're wrong when it comes to investing. And I think in this model in particular, 15, 20 years ago, it was, you have incubators and you have a slice of the pie, rather than the verticalized model of where you guys are talking about housing and everything that really needs to go into, say, producing an innovation economy in an area that is not, let's say, New York or San Francisco, whatever it is. And I think one of the things that we're seeing now is it's really important for the different constituencies to understand timescales. And I don't think a lot of people understand venture math, right? So if you purely look at, I think you said you have 70 companies in the space, you funded 40. A lot of people don't understand the power law that one IPO is all of the other 70 lead into that success, right? Innovation clusters. And so venture is often a green banana. And even beyond being the green banana, changes in Sequoia's fund structure going evergreen. Obviously, Andreessen changed from, they're now a registered investment advisor, and they're starting to see you need to go even longer than the 10-year fund life cycle. But when you think about it on the economic development time scale, I think a lot of places that aren't Silicon Valley don't understand that a lot of the failure is the economic development, right? A bunch of these companies, those people will work for the winners. And then you get the whole PayPal mafia effect of people learn what it takes to build something, and then you get the spin out. So I think people need to take the right time horizon view of this. And we almost need to measure success differently if you're looking at it as economic development. And then from a fund perspective, not a lot of people understand venture math. And from an upskilling, that's something that this plays on all those things. And I think there's an education gap into where certain things might not look like success. Those things are required for success, if that makes sense.
It totally does. And you're 100% right. We live in a 8 to 10 to 12 year time frame as venture investors, even private equity investors. So it's a little bit like watching paint dry. But if you do get a couple big wins, some mover, we were lucky with Beta, right? We were in the right place at the right time. They've made a tremendous splash. We grew up together through our infancy together. Us and Beta was growing exponentially. We were growing exponentially. Our reputation as investors was growing along with the burgeoning of Beta. So we've actually and it was only a 6.5 year time frame, which is a little bit quicker than the usual time frame, as you rightly point out. There's other companies as well. We have other unicorns in the portfolio, which is amazing for a tiny state of Vermont. People don't know about those as much. But that's why I think the physical infrastructure here at Hula is so important, because we can always fall back on that, right? And say, listen, this is a 30, 40-year investment. It's not just going to be me on the investment committee or Russ long term, right? This institution, this icon, the church, whatever, decided to build Notre Dame in Paris, right? To create a statement, put a flag in the ground. Put a flag in the ground. GDP growth and employment is important. And it's not just any jobs, right? We invest in companies that do good things for the world, right? They really embody the Vermont ethos. These are companies like Electric Aviation, Beta, right? That Vermont can get behind, green tech, right? But we put a long-term, to your point, flag in the ground that said long-term venture investing, business formation, GDP growth is important to the state of Vermont. And this place is an emblem of that.
And I think and I know, Greg, we have some news stuff to get to, but I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to keep going. I think there's so many critical pieces of your model that really we need a lot more people studying. In coming out of the great financial crisis, Boston had some real problems, right? Obviously, in the 80s and everything out on 128 and outside of Boston, we should have been competing with what ultimately Silicon Valley ended up winning. We had the original model for venture capital came from ARDC, which was the partnership between MIT and Harvard. We obviously have a ton of talent, and we missed the boat on how capital allocation and needs for technology were changing, which was just to get your V1 of a product in the 90s, you needed $3 to $5 million with the cloud and all of that. These entrepreneurs needed significantly less capital. We lost Zuckerberg, we lost Drew Houston of Dropbox, all the famous stories. But when we were coming out of the great financial crisis, I remember talking to a number of investors, and they're saying community development comes from the entrepreneurs. And I kept saying, it can't come from the entrepreneurs. They're building one thing. And what you need is a platform for economic development, and that's capital's job. So I think the fact when you talk about leadership, I do think that is hands down, everything is downstream of that piece of it. And when we think about capital allocation, particularly in the venture space, I think there's a very good argument for it's, even though the numbers are lower, when you look at the big hits in a Vermont or another area that isn't one of the major markets, it's so hard to go compete in Silicon Valley against a Sequoia or someone like that. So when you're talking about alpha, the talent that goes to those companies, it's not from Silicon Valley. Oftentimes, like, people migrate there. And if you can corner that opportunity and have a true differentiation in another area, there are all these examples of where kind of innovation and home runs or grand slams, whatever we want to call them, are popping up in other areas. So anytime I talk to people on the capital side, it's like, how do you differentiate? You can get lucky and you can be a good stock picker, but when you're pitching LPs, the differentiation, I think, geographically is a real one, but it does come with more work than, hey, we get into the right circles in Silicon Valley, we catch a good co-investment with a great brand, great. But I think anybody listening, like, it's a ton of work, which you know better than we do, but I really think it's such a differentiated model. It's the way of the future, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're not. We're essentially a family office, right? And we're essentially a family office that is collaborating with other 5, 6, 7 large family offices here in the state of Vermont, and then another 90 business founders and investors,
Mm.
right? So we're not having, and we take nothing from them. We don't have outside LPs, right? We have 3 partners in our
Yeah.
fund.
Yeah.
Russ is the central LP. So we don't have to sell anything to anybody. People call us and say, "Hey, what are you guys investing in?" And or we'll say, "We got to do a $25 million Series A." We basically hit the bat signal goes up. We put 30 people in this room, and we can raise $25 million in a day.
Mm.
So we don't have to pass the hat on the LP side and convince any LP outside the state that Vermont is a place to invest in. And this is really the power of the model. It is place-based investing.
Mm-hmm.
It's for people who love their place. Just imagine, and Kendall Square, I've studied a lot. Think of a Hula type model. And I'm not just talking about I know there's a bunch of different co-working spaces there, but a real Hula-based model where you took the wealth of the greater Boston area, right? And you aggregated it somehow. You had 200 people that had done extremely well from all the different waves of technology coming through Boston, biotech and everything else. And you said, now let's actually try to do good for Kendall Square in Boston generally on a macro level. We're not asking for charity here either. Let's just get a little bit organized, create friendships. Let's just get a little bit organized, because before we were doing this, folks were doing a deal over here, folks were doing a deal over there, and nobody was talking to each other. And just imagine the power of that in Kendall Square, of these 200 key investors just talking to each other, knowing each other, having a place to congregate,
Do you
right?
think
Going
that's
to dinner together.
Do you think that's going to happen? Let me caveat what I'm about to say first by saying I love our customers. They are always right. I love landlords. I love REITs. They are the best. You made mention, so we got that out of the way. You said a few times that you're not a CRE guy. Okay. Now that stuck with me as we're having this conversation. But are you not the future of commercial real estate? Are you not building a city in Vermont? Are you not developing the 100 acres or whatever that stat was, that residential, the housing units, and the model that you just described? You're, to me, where the future of commercial real estate needs to go. And what you're describing in Kendall Square would be great, but can we get there when it feels like a lot of the CRE folks, and again, love them, always are in somewhat of an older model?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Again, I think if I'm CRE anywhere, but particularly these smaller cities or even Boston, it doesn't matter. I would be following what people like us are doing,
Yeah.
right? So if I'm like if I have a new startup idea, it's like, how about scrub the internet, not your pitch book stuff, what's happened, what's already happened, what's going to happen in future rounds in say a city like Burlington. And all of a sudden you can scrub that and extrapolate out. And now you're getting a glimpse of capital flows for the future, which is what CRE developers really want. That's like what ecosystems that are not fully tapped out, like maybe a Boston or New York, right, are putting the most capital to work and have the most dynamism in capital markets, right? As a CRE developer, I want to put my hand up and I want to go to that market. And I want to capture that. Why? Because I do think models like us are the future of CRE. All right. Because our goal is your goal, 10% annual GDP growth, right? I want to raise my hand as a CRE developer into that kind of ecosystem.
Is there anybody else out there are you talking to anybody?
A lot. Yeah. We're talking to a lot of people, and Estrada was great for that. Thank you guys for putting that on. We had guys, six people, 6 weeks ago, we had 4 people come from Portland, Maine. Portland, Maine, perfect place for another Hula. Rue Institute is doing their thing. These guys are trying to do it up there. This Hula model will happen in Portland, Maine over the next 2 years. Connecticut came to us. and said, hey, we want to do something. We got an inquiry from Panama City, Panama. So we want to do a Hula model in Panama. I got a call from Switzerland, a co-working space, that one I mentioned in Switzerland. So it goes on and on, but you can see Reno, Nevada, you can see Asheville, North Carolina, you can see Boulder, Colorado. Brad Feld, as you guys know, already did this in Boulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, and Dominic Endicott, he wants to put this kind of model everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Yeah,
love.
I do. I like that as well. And I think like the takeaway for everyone is I really do. I think your point about the family offices is so critical because you need local leadership with capital that authentically cares about their place. And then I think the lesson for commercial real estate, and we talk about this all the time on the show and then in a bunch of our other content that we produce, is there's this very structural shift where the if you build it they will come. We just live in a way more dynamic world than that, and there has to be why and purpose and reason for bringing people together. I think community is really critical, and when you look at um, anyone in commercial real estate where the core competency set does not include that community element, then you're going to be susceptible to the risk that our economic cycles are shorter, leases are shorter. When you think about ultimately what you're underwriting, I think it's very difficult if you don't really have your finger on the pulse of demand in a way where you can see it in all the kind of aggregate REIT returns of traditional workplace REITs, which is incredibly underperforming, where people can put their capital in other ways. And I think a lot of people want to spend a lot of time on interest rates and cost of capital, but there's a structural demand change, and this kind of placemaking with economic purpose, I think, is where the risk mitigation comes in for the owners of the real estate assets. So that, I think what you're doing is just so smart.
And Chase, how is it that on these market surveys that banks are doing, right? It's underwriting. So whatever it's a $750 million project that we're doing next door here, 1,400 units of housing. I think we got 4 appraisals going simultaneously. How can those market studies not create a heat map, of capital formation and business formation for the future? They're looking backwards,
Oh, it's
right?
all backwards.
It's all backwards, and
Yeah.
they've got no capacity. And with AI now, we have the capacity to extrapolate out from Series A and Series B into Series C and D that haven't happened yet. And how is that not even being talked about in market studies and in ICs of banks that are underwriting big projects, saying who's in charge of business formation? And it's obviously not just us. Yes, it is the state government, et cetera, et cetera. It is the banks. There is the housing issue. There's daycare, all that. But aggregating data that is actually relevant in appraisals, it's 20 years behind that industry.
And even just the way I was talking to a good friend who is in acquisitions, and even how he looks at the models of what he's looking at every day, they're not even looking at the individual tenants. They're purely looking at the contractual terms within the lease.
Right.
And it truly is mind-boggling, which is where I think, Greg, you're getting at this, which I think, again, I'm just going to continue to press everybody listening, which is you're looking at, in the background here, a beautiful space. And I think a lot of commercial real estate people would come to the property, and what they would take away from this is beautiful, we should build this. And there's so much more of it where the skill set is going to be in the people who understand essentially modern data science, which with AI, there's no excuse not to be trying to be much more forward looking and understand what goes into, to your point, business formation, talent development. It's not just static backwards looking talent, but like, how do you think about the continuous learning of the local population, which I think is a critical capability for any economic area. And then how do you think about the physical infrastructure to support that? Because there's a lot of smart people and very talented people that can develop space, but I think where the returns are going to come is in exactly what you're talking about, Rob, which frankly is just a different skill set.
Yeah.
And it's a different way of thinking.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm a CRE developer in Boston, I contact 100 of the top capital allocators in Boston, and I ask them, let me know your number one bet. We all have favorites, right?
Sure.
Give me your number one and number two bets inside of your portfolios, vis-a-vis growth. Now I've got a list of 200 of the highest potential growth companies in the Boston ecosystem, and I'm a CRE developer, right? I get to know those companies.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have a joke here, this is how we do it. You come in, you're a single coworker at a co-working desk. This happens to us like every week. Then all of a sudden you're forming a little company. You have 4 people, you need an office with a door. Now you're at 25 people. We got to kick you out of this building, kick you over next door. And then you go to 100 people. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're 100 people. We've got to kick you out into the CRE market. And we're doing this for ourselves now. But if I'm a developer in Boston, right, I am basically hanging around the rim of all the capital allocators and saying, when are you kicking them out? Right? They don't have co-working spaces, but when are they going to get to 100 people? I'm hanging around the rim, and I've got 200 of these companies that are burgeoning.
As a developer, I should be calling you
That's
and
right.
saying, hey, let me pull you into a JV because you have green technology, everything that you're doing in space. And I'm sure you guys have seen this halo effect. We saw it in the Seaport in Boston through mostly creative chaos and some good work by Mass Challenge and a couple of the groups here. But the law firms gravitate towards it. Bigger companies that have the fear of missing out on innovation start to gravitate towards it. And that's where it really is ecosystem building. And you have to think of it's the economic life cycle that commercial real estate, that not only do the developers not ask people like yourself who the companies are, but they don't think about the life cycle of that company and how do we design our product to mirror what stages the business is going through. They don't think about the demand. They just look at other supply and say, all right, those guys have a great lobby. They got a great roof deck. And when supply just copies supply in any industry, that's commoditization. Right. So I could slam my head on a brick wall over and over again about this. But
so I don't know if it's come across in the show yet, but I'm pessimistic about Boston being in the tech and venture and commercial real estate community now for almost all of my career. Bummed out. And one comment is when you said you're going to talk to 100 of the best capital allocators in Boston and get their 1 to 2 favorites, you're going to find that none of them are actually in Boston, which is a bummer. So let's talk about the state of venture just real quick, because we talked Dominic Endicott. I think I asked him a question. What's one of the healthiest metrics for a city? And spoiler alert, that's coming your way. That question's coming your way towards the end of the show. I think he said startups, right, Chase? And and I think he might be talking his own book because he's a venture guy.
Leading indicator, I'm with him.
But so what is the state of venture right now? There's a lot of talk about late stage SaaS and private equity and venture, how it's going through an inflection point, how it might be dying, whatever it may be. Then there's a lot of talk that there's a significant amount of dry powder on the sidelines. Rob, what's your take on the state of venture? And then as it relates to what we're talking about here with smart cities and GDP growth and startups as a key economic indicator.
Wide lens, we have the most powerful venture and private equity system on the planet, right? Nowhere better in the world than the United States at creating companies. That's the super wide lens, right? Tremendous amount of resources. Did we go through a tough time with the pandemic? Yes. You had this huge burst of activity, and then we had 2.5 years of kind of nuclear winter. Nobody could raise money for funds. Companies couldn't therefore raise money. Really hard time in 22, 23. 24 was hard too. Starting to come back in 25. And now ups and downs, now with tariffs, now with the war in Iran. So every time we think the IPO window is open, And that's the key to venture, right? It's like the key to venture and private equity is pricing. And if the window isn't open and there's no liquidity in the system, pricing goes down. We've seen terrible pricing. It's starting to come back over the last 12 months now. IPOs are starting to come back, but now we've taken a couple steps back again with the war. So I think that's the macro on venture. Hard to make money in venture. We've been extremely lucky. I think we'll be top decile, but no one understands better than me how hard it is to be successful. It's very difficult. Even if you're 1xing, 2xing for family offices, even when I was at Morgan, I never could accept the fact that ESG, you had to take lower returns. And I will never accept place-based investing like we're doing here. I will never accept slightly lower returns because there's an ethical side of it, right? An ESG side. I'll never accept that. And we're top decile right now, knock on wood. So that's our micro venture, right? Venture in Vermont is extremely healthy right now. We've got great companies, like I said, a couple unicorns, great growth. And yeah, but it's a tricky business. I've heard you guys talk about it. It's tricky stuff.
People got to be able to ride the highs and lows. That's for sure. I don't think people understand, even from your winners. I'm sure you know the stories, but if we had the founders on here, it's great, it's terrible, it's great, it's terrible. There's no story that doesn't go through that. I think Jensen
100%.
does the best job of explaining that.
And a little bit like the CRE market, right? Too.
Yeah, true.
You have to. And the other thing I would say in this whole model, guys, Dominic would echo this. This is not for non-professionals, right? This type of economic development through venture and private equity, it's not for people that haven't been in it, dedicated to their entire lives. And that is what we are. And the top 3 investors that we invest with, they know exactly what they're doing. And you can't enter this as a neophyte and hope to have any kind of success.
We see the Blackstones of the world, they're diversified capital, right? They're the absolute whales. Brookfield as well. They have a venture arm. They have a sort of commercial real estate arm. Even some of our investors, Chase, or some of our customers have tried to create somewhat of a CVC or venture arm. Will we see more of that? As you think about next generation cities and building smarter cities, will we see more smaller shops allocate capital to both creating cities and creating jobs and startups, funding those companies similar to what you're doing?
Absolutely, no doubt. You just have to look at the data. Alts are taking over the world. And why is that? Because there's so much capital available. There's just so many places you can invest in the bond market and then in the public markets. Remember, guys, that public markets comprise 10% of all assets in the United States. Think about that. So all of that focus on the public markets, the New York Stock Exchange, right, the NASDAQ, that's only 10% of all assets. And alts are growing exponentially for super ultra high net worth people. Now, it used to be, let's do 10, 15% alts. That's real estate, it's private equity, that's venture, et cetera. Now at Morgan, at Goldman, I can tell you from firsthand experience that, we're pushing books to 50%. Obviously, this is over $100 million of wealth. You could be 50% in alternative investments, and a big chunk of that, Blackstones of the world, BREIT, and all that, you're in real estate, and that's good. That's a good thing for your world, for the CRE world, for my world too. So that it's doing nothing but growing.
Yeah. Before we get to rapid fire, one other question. I want to just go back to, you were talking about the underwriting side of the house and LLMs and AI and just the data that sort of needs to be captured and how we're always looking backwards and we need to look forward. As you're building your smart city, because you are building a smart city, or you're building a city, let's hope it's smart. And that's my leading sort of indicator to the question. How are you thinking about technology? How are you thinking about, you talked about infrastructure, super fast internet, et cetera. How are you thinking about the future of the data that you're going to capture and what you're going to be able to do with that in 10 years or X number of years when all of your residential is built? How do you think about the smart city element, the data element to what you're building?
Frankly, I love to talk to HQO about that. We're going to have,
I didn't plan that.
We're going to have 1,400 units of housing over there. I think your business idea is brilliant. We are literally mapping out an experience of living in a innovation district, in an innovation economy. So we mapped out the experience of coming into 80,000 square feet all on one floor, 50,000 square feet all on one floor. What is the experience for founders and tech workers and coworkers? What is the experience? What are the water cooler moments? All of that, we mapped all that up for the workspace. We don't know so much about how you map that out, track data, et cetera, for the built community. And I think it'll be an interesting exercise. I'd love to talk to you more about it. How do you now build an entire living community around an ethos of innovation, business formation, et cetera, in a small tier 2 city, right? How do you now do that? Hula's right across the street from 1,400 units of housing. One thing we're doing is we're doing a huge 4,500 square foot makerspace. All of our beta people, all our companies are going to be living there. So all these engineers are going to descend on this makerspace, and they're going to have access to everything in the world. This is what they told us that they want. What's the experience? You guys tell us, right? You guys track this stuff. What's the experience that our tenants are having vis-a-vis a lived experience in the innovative kind of landscape of Hula and those maker spaces? How do we build the lived environment for an innovation district now in an AI era? How do we do that? And we're just starting. We're just breaking ground in July, and we've got 6 phases. So it's going to be a fun ride to try to get to your question, Greg, of what data do we need to inform the experience?
I think that's the bottom line for people in commercial real estate. But what you just described is the way that a product designer thinks. Right. And I think the industry frankly, I think both sides, pure play venture capital and commercial real estate, have a lot to learn here. When you look at the investor pitch decks, which obviously, you guys have the luxury of not having to do that. But for anybody else listening, everybody thinks they're different. And you hear about the platform from both. And I really think a lot of this comes down to really thinking about platform on the venture side. I think this physical component is such a huge differentiator if you're truly tied, in a genuine way to your physical place. And on the commercial real estate side, I can't even describe how little thinking there is of the user journey and the user outcomes, and ultimately how that's going to flow down to the bottom line.
Oh, we'll get this on the record. Sorry, Justin.
I'll just take that as you thought it was such a good bottom line statement. That was enough.
No idea.
After you were throwing darts at me at the beginning of the show.
I messed something up. Yeah, to be honest, Chase, I was sick and tired of hearing you talk. I was like, we're done here.
All right, let's do rapid fire.
Let's do it. Quick. To end the show, 3 quick questions. And generally my questions are never quick, so I'll caveat that. So let's go back to that single most important metric for a healthy city. Again, I'm pretty sure Dominic Endicott was startups. Not sure where you're going to go, but as you're thinking about, again, building your city or other cities that you're trying to emulate, or maybe you're trying to build future cities where everybody can emulate off you, what is that single most important metric for a healthy city today?
Frankly, I think it's the organization that we did with investors and business owners to focus capital and expertise on giving back to specifically business formation. I would say that.
And usually we do 12 months, but I like the last question here. In 10 years, what is, and you can't say Burlington, what is the next great city in America? Again, people are flooding Austin and Miami, and, maybe Silicon Valley is coming back. Obviously, what you're doing in Burlington is incredible. Are we overlooking anybody? Is there anybody super inspiring that you see some green shoots, and in 10 years, you're going to be like, wow, look at that?
I think I'd say Portland, Maine.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they've got it going on. They've got the proximity to Boston a little bit more than we do too. I expect amazing things, and maybe a Boulder as a close second, Colorado.
Do you think, and this is where my questions are never short, do you think that the creation of these cities and what you're doing in Vermont is going to hurt some of our tier 1 cities, Boston, New York, etc.?
No, I don't think that. I don't think it's not a zero sum. It never is. Yeah.
Love it. Okay, last question. So we like to talk about AI on the show. We like to talk about agents. Recently, we kicked off a little bit. You said you were building some agents. What is a great prompt or an agentic workflow that you've been playing with recently that has got you really thinking, holy hell, we're living in the future right now?
I think it's whatever everyone is talking about, prompting AI to tell us how to prompt. And again, this is not a new idea, but asking AI the best way that I can prompt it into a specific task.
Mm.
I know it feels circular to do that, but we do that at every phase and at every kind of a benchmark of our iterating. How can we best help you? What did we do wrong in the last prompting? And how can you help us to help ourselves in the next set of prompts?
Mm.
Love it. So we have millions, if not hundreds of millions of listeners and viewers of the show, Rob.
I love it.
if
World's
you-
greatest moderator, Greg. World's greatest moderator.
Let's
Oh,
go.
geez, don't pump his tires, Rob. Don't pump.
JCal is nothing on you, dude.
Here we go. Let's gonna clip that up. If people want to get in touch with you and Hula and come take a look up in Burlington, how do they best go about that? You've built some incredible things. Personally, we're gonna take a field trip when the weather gets a little bit nicer.
I love it.
Up to you. But if other folks are inspired by the work and hopefully some of the stories you've told us today, how do they get in touch with you guys?
Yeah, that best way to ping me is Robert at thefund@hula.com, all spelled out. Love to hear from you.
Love it. Well, listen, this was an incredible show. Again, we got to absolutely zero of the show notes, but it was one of the most inspiring shows. I think what you're building is the future, and we're just super excited to have you. So thanks again. Really, really appreciate it. Chase, anything else?
No, I just think everybody should study the model. It really is the future. So thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you guys for doing this. This is an amazing public service. And yeah, you've earned a listener for life here. Love what you guys are doing.
Appreciate it. Oh, maybe we'll get a couple of desks up there in Burlington.
I love it. Come on up. Bring your skis. Better hurry.
Yeah.
All right.
See you guys.
That's
Take
a wrap.
care.
Thanks.
All right.